There are 29 online, so we will start now. This will be recorded. I do hope that you have seen already the first two lectures in the website, and you were able to download already the materials that I required you to download so that you can follow our lecture for today. I will continue now because last week we started with the introductory part of psychology, and we were able to define what psychology is. Come to think of it, if we can recall, psychology is defined as a science that deals with the study of the psyche, which is what we call as the soul. Or we use this psychology in order to understand, explain, and predict human behavior. Okay? Now, we'll go into a deeper understanding of what psychology is. As I mentioned earlier, can you follow me, by the way? I would like to find out. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, psychology actually came from philosophy. You know, philosophy is the mother of all sciences and mother of all liberal thinking. All right, because philosophy before actually questions everything. Philosophy is defined as let's say, a subject or discipline that deals with the study of wisdom. So it explains everything. So it runs out, no? And until such time that psychology was founded based on some of the philosophical issues that were actually questioned out of the study of philosophy or the lab of wisdom. Now, so let us try to look into some of the philosophical issues relevant to the study of psychology. Okay? So we move forward. The major philosophical issues are the following. We'll start with free will versus determinism. What is the meaning of this? No, you see, if you are going to look at our decision-making process, no, we decide based on material evidences that we actually are holding, the knowledge that we are actually holding, or the perception that we actually have. So let us try to understand that. What is actually the meaning of this? Based from free will versus determinism, we are going to look at this. No, these are the causes of behavior that is actually knowable. Is also the behavior predictable. So let's say from the decision using free will. Now, what is actually the meaning of this? Is our behavior based from our free will? What is the meaning of this? No. Free will is the belief that behavior that is caused by an individual's independent decision making. Whatever you do, however you act, whatever you think about is actually a product of your own free will. It's you and you alone that will decide, nothing else. Okay? That is one philosophical issue versus determinism. Everything is predestined. No? This is the assumption that everything that happens has a cause in the observable world, in the observable behavior, the thing that we know. If something happened today, just because it is meant to happen, we're always telling that, no, something happened because that's meant to happen. That is actually the meaning of determinism. Everything is already predetermined. Everything already has a cause. Everything already is put into place by something or someone that is actually higher. You see? So there is a major philosophical issue here, because if you're going to look at that too, this will not be complementary, this will be contradictory. That's the reason why until now, we cannot actually decide what is really the cause of our behavior. Is this the cause? Is it actually coming from our free will? Or is it coming from determinism? As I repeat, free will versus determinism. No? In free will, all the behaviors that we do, all the actions that we do, all the things that we think about is caused by our own volition. It's caused by our independent thinking, nothing else. The nature has nothing to do here. Predetermination has nothing to do here. You see? Nothing else. It will actually be solely coming from you. Until now, this debate is still lingering, no? Of course, if we are more religious, we will actually stand on determinism, because we always think that everything has a reason. Everything is caused by God. Everything is determined to be destined to be what happened, no? So it's something like that, no? So free will versus determinism, that's one of the philosophical issue that the psychology is actually trying to answer. Okay, is there really a cause of our behavior? Is it predetermined, or is it because we do things just because we like it, just because that's based on our decision? That is one. Number two, the mind and the brain problem. How is experience related to the organ system called the brain? So the mind and the brain. If we are going to look into mind, we are always looking into the anatomy and physiology of into the thing that's actually unseen. The brain, on the other hand, we look into the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system that actually cause our decision-making process. All right? Is the mind independent from the brain, or is the mind is one with the brain? So we come to that decision later on upon knowing the two process. These are the two philosophical issues that we have. The concept of dualism and the concept of monism. Now in dualism, this is based on the belief that the mind is separate from the brain, but controls the brain and through it the whole body. What is actually the meaning of this? Now, the mind is separate from the brain. The mind has an entity of its own, and the brain has an entity of its own, right? So this is actually the meaning of this one, no? So dualism, the mind and the brain can be dichotomized. The mind and the brain can be separate because mind and the brain are two different entities. Now in the concept of monism, we view the conscious process as generated by the oneness of mind and the brain. Mind and the brain will be one and the same because mind and the brain is imparable in the brain, right? Brain gives rise to mind and mind gives rise to the brain. It's not like in dualism, mind is dependent from the brain and the brain is dependent from the mind. So that is actually the meaning of this one. Now, if you're going to look into this in real application, come to think of it, you are learning anatomy and physiology, for instance. Now, when you learn anatomy and physiology, all the while you are actually concerned only with the structures and functions of the nervous system. Sometimes we do not look into what the nervous system generates. You see? Now, in analogy, if we are going to look deeper, the nervous system generates something that is located on the higher plane. And what is that? Something that is generated by the brain. This is actually what we call as the mind. The mind cannot be seen. The mind is an offshoot or the byproduct or the functions of the brain. So in a matter of dualism, mind and the brain are two different entities, right? So on the other hand, as we know, mind in the concept of monism is one with the brain. Therefore, mind and the brain are two inseparable things. Until now, this gives rise to some of the philosophical debate that gives rise to the issues that we're trying to solve in psychology. So this concept gives rise to biological psychology, neurobiology, neurology, among others. So a lot of psychologists are devoting their time in the study of the functions of the brain and at the same time how the mind is generated. They're trying to prove something in this case. So until now, we cannot come up with the right decision and the proper decision, which is which. Are we going to stick on the belief that mind and brain are two different entities, or mind and brain are similar entities? So these are some of the philosophical issues that until now we're trying to resolve. Luckily, because we're trying to resolve, we are giving rise to new sciences. We're giving rise to new branches of psychology. Okay? Moving forward, on the concept of nature-nurture issue, this gives rise to another branch of psychology which we call developmental psychology. So what is actually the meaning of this? How do differences in behavior relate to heredity and environment? we keep on believing that, no, our nature and nurture issue are all our behaviors product of the traits that we inherited from our parents. Therefore, the traits that we have absolutely came from our parents, nature, or nurture. We are the product of what we are exposed to. We are products of our environment. We are influenced by our environments. Now take a look at this. No, some scientists assume the larger proportion of differences in potential and behavior, these are due to genetic influences. So most of the time we keep on believing that, no, that what we are is just because we inherited them from our parents. That is the meaning of nature. Like for instance, your parents are genius, so you therefore are a very good student, genius. This is actually the meaning of it, no? You inherited your intellect from your parents, right? There are so many philosophical debates here, you see. Like for instance, an example is that if you're going to look at a family, you see, the parents may not be educated. The parents may not actually reach high school. But how come if you're going to look at the byproduct that necessarily the children produce, you were able to recognize that these children are all professionals? How come? What happened? So there is already the breakdown of the nature-nurture debate. There is a breakdown of the concept that everything comes from nature. Another very basic example. Parents who are actually good in the society, they're very useful in the society. How come that they have children who are bad? They have children who are law violators. They are children who are criminals. So what happened? Did they inherit the criminal behavior? Or is it a byproduct of the environment that they are exposed to? Continuously, the debate goes on like this. So many of the developmental psychologists are trying to study about all these phenomena, right? The nature-nurture issue, okay? All right, moving forward. Now, others would always assume that most differences relate to aspects of the environment, such as the culture, okay? Expectations and resources. Hello? Yes? Yes? Everything is settled already. We settled that already. We settled already. So they replaced. Yeah, they replaced already. Yes. You can close it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. All right. I'm very sorry, no? Okay, so then look at this. People assume that most differences relate to aspects of the environment such as culture. Now, this is in contradiction to the genetic factors. Now, as I was telling, are all that we have right now, the behaviors that we have are product of the traits that we inherited from our parents. That is the meaning of nature. No matter what happens in your environment, as long as your parents are good, then you tend to be good. That is actually the meaning of nature belief. But on the other hand, there are people who are actually advocating about the nurture. No matter what your genes will be, if you are exposed to certain culture, if you are exposed to certain group, if you are exposed to certain environment, you tend to become what the environment is trying to tell you to do. The expectation that we have in that environment, no matter how good your parents are, no matter how good your family will be, if you are exposed to bad environment, the tendency is that you may actually have a criminal act also. That is the controversy that we are looking into. You see, studying behavior is such very enriching, you know, and in a unique way, because we are going to be placed in a position to rethink about so many aspects, to come out with new things, to be creative in trying to explain all the behaviors that we may actually have. Of course, sometimes at a certain point, we need to come in a certain position and we have to depend our belief system. That's why in psychology, there are so many branches that try to explain about these philosophical issues. You see, if you're going to look at this philosophical issue give rise to virtually every field of psychology that we may actually have. Now, the knowledge gained through research will provide few simple answers, but not the total answers, but not the absolute answers of these philosophical issues that we tend to have. So these are some of the problems that we may actually have, that we may try to answer. Therefore, if we try to answer this, we are creating a new knowledge, we are creating a new field, we are trying to develop new fields in psychology, if that is actually the real case. So we are going to look into the different fields of psychology that that were developed just because of some of the philosophical issues that we try to answer. All right? So, you see, psychologists are like philosophers. We're trying to explain everything. We're trying to explain human behavior. We concentrate on behaviors, not only on human behaviors, but on behaviors of other people. You see? And sometimes, you see, psychologists also may tend to look into other living things. Maybe the behavior of insects. See, there are psychologists who are focusing on that, the behavior of animals. In fact, a lot of Nobel Prize winners are actually winning just because they study the behaviors of others. Like, for instance, one of that one is, the first one we have, of course, Ivan Pavlov, studied about the dogs. Now, then another one, of course, we have the Konrad Lorenz, studied about the behavior of bird, something like that, no? So let's try to move forward. What do psychologists do, right? Of course, if we are going to look at this, no, psychology is an academic, non-medical discipline. We do not prescribe medicine, and we are going to include so many branches and specialization. Of course, our tendency to predict human behavior is also helping us to help people to modify this human behavior. That's the reason why we are also helping people therapeutically by doing psychotherapy and by doing counseling. Now, if you really would like to become a helpful person and become a psychologist, these are some of the academic requirements that you may actually have, educational requirements, as I say, no? You should not only have a bachelor's degree. You must always have master's degree. Then, more advanced is a PhD, and another one is Doctor of Psychology. These are some of the most common terminal degrees that psychologists do have. Now, I do have both, no, a PhD and Doctor of Psychology. So these are some of the terminal degrees that we are actually having in order to practice and become psychologists. No, right. Moving forward. So where do psychologists practice? In so many areas, no? In the field of education, lots, no? As is, it's going to be presented by Red. Healthcare system, they work side by side with psychiatrists. Most of the people who are actually working, or most of the psychologists who work in the healthcare systems, are clinical psychologists, no? Then the government, like in the case of people who are doing investigations or investigative works. In the United States, most of the time, they employ lots of psychologists in the investigative body, the FBI and the CIA. And of course, other psychologists are working as self-employed. They have their own clinics, and of course, others, no? They may do consultancy, right? And other things, okay? So moving forward, there are many specialties in the broad science of psychology, no? So psychologists will practice in three major areas, as I mentioned. Service providers for individual. In that case, we are actually practicing as clinicians, or we are practicing as consultants among self-employed and the consultant in this one chunk. Around 2/3 of the practitioners who are psychologists are having clientele as individuals, no? They also provide services to big organizations. Now, most of the psychologists are working as industrial and organizational psychologists, where they are positioned. Most of the time, they are in human resource department because, you know, in the human resource department, it is where you are actually going to maintain people. One, you try to recruit people or workers. You try to train them and retain them. Then after that, if they cannot be trainable and if they cannot be educated enough, then you fire them. So this is actually the work of human resource department, and most of the human resource department personnel must be psychologists, organizational and industrial psychologists. And of course, the third one where the practice would be teaching and research. In most of the universities, we conduct research and we do teach, because we believe that we can contribute in the body of knowledge that we are actually using if we contribute in the knowledge that other people we may actually use eventually. As teachers, it is imperative for us to contribute to the body of knowledge in psychology. We extensively conduct researches in universities, no? Just like in this university, a lot of studies are being conducted in psychology. Or we look into different aspects of human behaviors, the behavior of students, the behavior of teachers, the behavior of parents, the behavior of people around us. So these are the areas where psychologists may actually work. Individual, they are service providers with individual, they are service providers with big organizations, and at the same time, they may be found in the school. Because you see, we believe that every profession may actually be taught at least a simple knowledge of psychology, because we are, by all means, we will be connecting with human beings. Even though you are an engineer, you are supposed to be knowledgeable in mathematics, but still, you will connect with people, you know, in trying to build the building that you're supposed to build. There are so many people who will actually be building it. So you should have human connection, human relationship. You have to understand human behavior in this aspect. Okay? So every single profession must always need knowledge in psychology. That's why psychology, we believe, is very important, no? No, so let's try to look into the service providers to individuals. As I mentioned earlier, we start with clinical psychologists. Now, how can you become a clinical psychologist? Of course, you should have big training, you should have advanced training. You cannot only become a clinical psychologist if you graduate from bachelor's degree. You should have at least a minimum of PhD, and at the same time, you should have clinical experience. But because you are going to treat human beings, you are going to treat people who are mentally ill. It's just that you cannot prescribe medicine, but there are tools that you may use in order to assist and help people who are mentally ill. They have advanced degrees in psychology. Definitely, as I mentioned earlier, they may actually have PhD or Doctor of Psychology. And of course, advanced training in clinical psychology, because you're going to see people who are mentally ill. They help people with mental and emotional disorders. They work side by side with psychiatrists. Now, to better understand their clients, the clinical psychologists receive training in intellectual and psychological testing. We usually give psychological testing that is used in diagnosing and treatment. Now, you can actually qualify to become a clinical psychologist if you know how to diagnose and how to treat. Now, diagnosis requires specific knowledge of abnormal psychology and the psychology of human individual. And of course, if you are going to make diagnosis like that, you are also capable of giving treatment. Just like you, dentist to be. What are you going to do? You're going to look for problems. You cannot actually treat an individual without identifying the problem. Likewise, in clinical psychology, they identify problem using the tools that they may actually have. These are psychological knowledge and other psychometric testing that they actually are trained for. Then after that, they can always help that particular mentally ill patient based on the kind of training that he has. There are so many psychologists who are actually using specific psychotherapy that we have to tackle as we go on. So psychiatrists, on the other hand, what is the difference between psychiatrists and clinical psychologists? There is very big difference, but there is a commonality between the two. Clinical psychologists and psychiatrists treat mentally ill patients. Now, what makes the two different? We start with number one. We start with the degree, the qualification, educational qualification, right? For clinical psychologists, they should have bachelor's degree specifically in psychology, okay? And they have advanced degree in psychology, master's and doctoral psychology. While psychiatrists are medical doctors, they have MBBS or MD degree first, but they don't stop there. So they are trained to treat mentally ill people. So they are going to specialize for 5 more years in order to treat mentally ill people. Now, in a matter of treatment, that's number one. Number two, in a matter of treatment, clinical psychologists cannot use medicine, cannot use drug to treat mentally ill patient, while psychiatrists can use drugs, can prescribe drugs in order to help or cure mentally ill patient. Now, of course, as of now, in the United States and other parts of Europe, psychologists are already enriching their profession. They fight back, not they fight, and they try to lobby with the government. So as of now, in some states in the United States and in Europe, they already can prescribe medicine. Also, doctors who are psychologists may be equal to psychiatrists in some states, only in the United States and Europe, no? So in addition to training in psychology, right, psychiatrists, they are educated in how to use prescription drugs to treat psychological disorders. So these are psychiatrists. So the first thing that we have is a medical degree. They must become a doctor first, a medical doctor, before they become a psychiatrist. Yeah? Just like in dentistry, there are general dentists and there are dentists who are actually catering to orthodontics or to pediatrics, no? So you need to specialize. At first, you will become general doctor. In that case, in the case of psychiatrists, the first training that they have is general medicine, that is MBBS and MD, before they are actually going to get their license to practice psychiatry, no? So they need to be trained for 5 or more years. So if they are trained already, then they can prescribe medicine. Prescription of medicine is the thing that makes the two different. For psychologists, sir, how come that psychologists treat patients? We treat patients as psychologists using psychotherapy. These are the techniques that we are learning in our advanced degrees without prescription. Okay? So, on the other hand, psychiatrists may not know psychotherapy. Okay? They know medicine, they know how to prescribe, they know some basic knowledge of mental disorder, but they may not know all about some of the psychotherapeutic techniques that they may actually be using in the treatment of the patient. So psychiatric nurse, no? Of course, as I mentioned to you earlier, psychiatric nurses are nurses. They're trained as general nurse first because before they can specialize in treating medical or psychiatric disorders, they receive standard nursing education plus additional training in the care of emotionally troubled individuals. No, they mainly work side by side with the psychiatrists and hospitals. You see, they work with doctors. Sometimes psychologists may not actually have any assistant at all. We do the work all the time, but for nurses, we always assist in the treatment of the psychiatrists. No, all right. We always work side by side with psychiatrists. Although we are independent, but we cannot be what we are to be as nurses if we will not be working side by side with the doctors or with the psychiatrists. But again, just because of the improvement of so many areas of discipline or professions as of this time, there are nurses who are practicing independently. We call them as nurse practitioners. They have their own clinics also, competing with the psychiatrists. So this is the evolving thing that we have in every profession. Profession evolves. Mind you, no, I'm telling you that, no? So moving forward, we have psychiatric and clinical social workers. What do? They combine their training in social work with specialized knowledge related to the treatment and of the advocacy for a well-being of emotionally disturbed people in the larger community. You see, if you're going to look into the life of an individual who is mentally ill, sometimes they do not want anymore by the society. They are cast by the society, even their family. They're cast away, no? They are not liked by their family members. And sometimes they are forgotten. You will be surprised that in some mental institutions, there are so many long-term patients who have been confined there. They're there for a long time. Now, what happened if they will become well? What happened if they become better? You see? When they will be released, especially after a long time, maybe after 15 or 20 years, who they're going to release the patient. That is actually the work of social worker, psychiatric and clinical social worker. They bridge the hospital with the community. So they try to let the community understand about the case that they are handling. They bridge hospital with the community. They make it sure that the community understands the patients that they are going to release. Moving forward, psychoanalysts. Now, psychoanalysts are psychologists who are followers of Sigmund Freud. No, they are basically following the teachings of Sigmund Freud. No, they use the health treatment strategies that are based on the theories and methods pioneered by Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud is the one that proposed psychosexual development that we will discuss extensively on the next chapter. But as of now, Sigmund Freud is the one that actually established the school of thought in psychology called psychodynamics or psychosexual. Now, Freud believed that an unconscious component of the human mind affects our functioning in day-to-day life. There is something hidden that is always affecting our day-to-day behavior, something that is originating from our past. Our behavior could be tainted by our past. Our behavior could be dictated or could be easily influenced by our past. What is this past all about? This has something to do with the unconscious process that we may actually have, especially the painful experiences that we could have encountered, unresolved negative experiences that we could actually have. These are all the things that influence our current behavior that may otherwise be unpleasant, that may otherwise be abnormal. Okay? If you are going to be a psychoanalyst, we try to look into that. Like for instance, now, There are so many things that happened to us in the past. Others we could not remember. Others we could remember a little bit, but others didn't know at all. But the painful experiences that they could actually have may be deposited in their unconscious. Let's say, for instance, that your parents were very crucial to you. Your parents were very, let's say, brutal to you. They were always scolding you when you were young. Then, as if they could not find any good things in you, you were always at fault. They would always blame you about everything that happens, bad or good, in the house. So what happens is that you actually harbor ill will or ill feelings with your parents. But of course, you cannot show. So just because you really would like to forget about it, this will be deposited in the unconscious. Just because our culture would always tell us we must love our parents. No matter that what they would do to you, our expression, the negative expression that we ought to form just because of the negative experiences that we have from them would always be deposited in our unconscious, no? So it would result into some unpleasant personality development that we may actually have. So currently, just because our parents did not love us in the past, maybe we are afraid to face our parent figure today. Just like, for instance, somebody who is a higher up, maybe a professor, maybe dean, will actually call you. You do not want to go because you would have associated that experience with your experience in the past that otherwise would be dictated in your unconscious. You know, so many experiences have been there, have been deposited there that will come out dictating the type of behavior that we may actually display as of now. Another one, of course, we have counseling psychologists, no? In the university, we have Miss Carol. What do we do in counseling psychology? We have advanced degree in psychology. We are trained to counsel people in marriage, in educational, vocational choices. It's very, very, very important, you see, especially after high school. You cannot just actually go and take a course that you want. There will be a very big problem if that will be the case, no? As a student, as an individual, if your school employ a guidance counselor, a counselor, school psychologist, they would always try to find a way to bridge you between the profession that you would like to enroll and your capacity. What is the meaning of this one? They will counsel you, no? Let's say you are not good in mathematics, but you enroll in engineering course. What happens? If you do not follow the advice of counseling psychologists, what happens that you are going to languish behind? You are not going to enjoy your college stay. Most probably, you will fail the course that you would like to enroll. Now, you're bad in mathematics, yet you choose to become an engineer. In one semester at the engineering college, maybe you may not survive just because of that. So what do counseling psychologists do? They will counsel on what specific course you may take based on the aptitude that they may actually establish. You know, they are going to conduct psychological testing, psychometric tests that they are licensed to all the time. So they will actually evaluate who you are, what you are capable of, so that they will actually advise you on what course to take. Another counseling psychologist area would be on marriage. You see, in Islam, I think it's taken over by imam. But in other countries, in other region, no, especially when you are actually for divorce already, they're trying. Especially the court will always tell you, you go and see first a psychologist, a counseling psychologist, because there will always be individual differences. If two people will actually come and work together, there will always be differences. And these differences may either be small or very big. If this will be very big, there will be quarrel, there will always be tension. And if there will always be tension, there will be abnormal mental health in the house, at home. So what happens that you maintain unhealthy relationship. If you maintain unhealthy relationship, you maintain unhealthy mental well-being. At the end of the day, you will be having some mental problems. So what will the counseling psychologist do? They will actually help you resolve the issues that you may actually have. Counseling psychologists are also trained in psychotherapy. Therapy using psychological concepts. That is the real meaning of psychotherapy, no? And some types of psychometrics, or we call it psychological testing. At all costs, by all means, we are not allowed to prescribe medicine. Not like doctors, if they will find that someone is actually having personality disorder, they prescribe a specific medicine. Huh? So moving forward, forensic psychologists. This is an entirely new discipline in psychology because we are always providing service and consultation to the criminal justice system and the judiciary. Psychologists, particularly forensic psychologists, are helping in the decision of, let's say, a person actually utilize a defense called mentally ill. So they should be, if they claim that they are mentally ill, therefore they must always be forgiven. They must be released, right? So this is, or other than that, in criminal investigations, you see, the forensic psychologists are very helpful because you see, criminals are always one way ahead or two way ahead. Now, since psychologists are always thinking in advance also because they are trying to predict human behavior, they're always thinking in advance. So therefore, forensic psychologists may also catch up with criminals. That is actually the work. Other than helping the judicial system, we're also helping the law enforcement agencies to catch criminals. This is our job. We try to analyze. In the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United States, we have the so-called profilers, no? When you say profilers, every single psychologist or working with the FBI would profile an individual. What is the meaning of profile? Writing or coming out with behavioral write-up of an individual. The tendency of this individual to become violent, the tendency of this individual to be easily influenced by extremists, the tendency of this individual to commit a crime. So we are always looking into that. That is actually the work of people who are working in profiling. These are usually psychologists who are trained in psychology as such. Okay? They have a deep background and a good knowledge or a good grasp in psychology. All right. As I was mentioning to you earlier, industrial and organizational psychology. Now, they study people's behavior in the workplace using a combination of social, cognitive, and motivational psychology principles, as well as psychological tests. So in industrial and organizational psychology, obviously we work in big organization, in a big industry. As I mentioned to you, we are always working side by side with the human resource department. We are always trying to decide or help the human resource department decide if we are going to hire you. You see, in a big industry, this is a big organization of people who are not related to one another. They are not family members. They are not genetically related. There is no genetic connection. Therefore, every single individual in an industry or in an organization is unique. They have their own personality. Therefore, we must be very careful in selecting individuals who will join this organization. Like, for instance, an organization who is actually producing products like Julfar, producing drugs, producing medicines. Therefore, the person that will be hired must be capable of following instruction. So we give psychological tests, we give IQ tests. And usually those who can easily follow instructions are those people with average IQ. So we give IQ tests. What if an individual actually gets, in the examination, a low IQ, let's say below 90? So therefore, the question will be, is this person trainable, or is this person not going to be hired? You see, when you hire someone, the big company is investing so much money. Training alone, much of 1 hour will be spent in the matter of training. They will not go to work immediately. They will be trained first. How many man-hours will be spent in order to train them? You see? If they cannot follow instruction, simple instruction, therefore they must be fired, or they must not be hired. Therefore, it's very important that we are going to assess their knowledge, the capacity to follow instruction. We are going to assess also their personality, because you see, they're going to live with an individual, with different types of people. Therefore, if you are very sensitive, you have no place. So we are going to look at this all the time. We try to decide who will join and those who will be fired. And also on the process, we are also helping in the process of training these individuals. This is the thing that we are actually usually doing as industrial and organizational psychologists. All right? Moving forward, we have the ergonomists. No? Now, ergonomists are psychologists or trained psychologists who are always training or involved in the process of making it sure that the machinery, that the equipment that we will be utilizing in a big industry will be useful or easy to be used by an individual. They have to conduct an study in such a way that it will be useful easily. Just like, for instance, the iPhone. The design of the iPhone is actually, of course, done by an architect or an engineer. But the usability input is done by ergonomists. No? They facilitate the design of machinery and equipment so that an average individual, an average user can operate them efficiently and safely. We have to make it sure that all individual, if properly trained with a minimal time, can actually utilize that particular equipment or machinery. That is the function of ergonomists. We call them as human factor specialists, no? Handling, covering, holding. We are all always looking towards the ergonomists, no? These are psychologists who are specialized in human factors. We are going to look at this all the time, no? We'll make it sure that the machineries that we'll be using can be easily operated by anyone with training or with proper training. Now, the other type of psychologists that we know of will be school psychologists. They specialize in psychological condition of the students. All right? So what do we do? You see, school psychologists, as the specialists imply school, they are always working with school children. You know, school children are very problematic. I believe, no? You were once school children. In some schools, you will be able to see so much problem. Children of rich people keep on stealing. There are so many things. Escaping, not going to the class directly, cheating, right? Improper relationship. These are some of the things that we are actually trying to solve as school psychologists. And of course, as a process, we'll try to understand first their background before we can actually make decision. Because we believe that if we're going to make wrong decision with these children, we will destroy the lives of these children. Right? School psychologists use combinations of developmental, learning, and motivational principles, right? As well as educational and psychological tests to create educational plans for individual students. We help them be successful in the school, despite of the problems that they may encounter. This is in complete opposition with educational psychologists, no? Now, school psychology, we are engaged with people. We are engaged with the students. Educational psychologists are engaged with the materials, the runaround of things, the mechanisms on how the student can actually understand more. So this is the main difference between the two. School psychologists are always looking into behavior modification of children. Okay? Do you have any questions so far, class? You follow? Or I am just talking to myself?
Yes, doctor.
Any questions so far at this point?
No, it's clear. But doctor, I have a question.
Yes.
When we are studying for the psychology subject, we have to follow your presentation while we are reading the physiology book?
This presentation is based on the psychology books that I give you, okay, by James Calat. So there are other deeper examples there, and these are simple. But what we have in James Calat is actually more comprehensive, complete examples. Okay.
Okay,
All
doctor.
right.
Thank you.
All right. So it's also wiser for you to take down notes and read also once in a while. Okay. So you should actually follow the books. All right. So moving forward, no. You see, if you are a school psychologist, you are going to look into some problematic situations, some children who do have problems, not only school problems. You will be surprised because if you're going to engage one student or one pupil, as we may call it, there will be so much complicated problem. Not the relationship between child and their parents, the relationship between the child and the brothers, the relationship between the child and the community. Usually we can actually find problems like that, no? Okay, like for instance, what do we do? No, if we will find out if a fourth grader has or is declining in terms of grades already, we look into that, no? Now, this could be an indication that there is a presence of learning disability or an emotional problem. We try to find it out. We'll not stop. We'll not just actually tell, hey, why is it that you are not doing good in this class? We will not do that as school psychologists. We'll try to find out. At first, we will suspect that there could be a learning disability or the child is just emotionally disturbed. Either or. If the child is found out to have some learning disability, we have to help the child. Or if we found out that the child has emotional problems, we need also to help. That's why assessment of every single school its children is very important. Now, I believe you can actually relate to this because you just actually came from high school. If you know, in high school, sometimes you will find so many problems there, no? Especially in United Arab Emirates. Especially, if they found you to be talking with someone else, let's say a male talking to female, sometimes the male would always be having a time off, no? They will go in, they will send the student. Sometimes if you are an untrained person, you can just actually go and punish them without asking question, without actually asking why. These individuals talk with the opposite gender. You see? A school psychologists would always try to help individual. We try to help people. We do not judge people. We do not punish people. We try to help them as much as we can. That's why we will always be advocating that in every school, there must always be school psychologists, because the tendency is that if you are an untrained teacher and you are going to find out an individual to be misbehaving, our tendency is immediately to punish them. School psychology does not work that way. We will not punish the child. We'll try to find out why that particular school its child committed such an offense. And after that, we would always try to help them. Assist first, then help them. Punitive actions, punishment may not be a rule rather than this is an exemption. No? Most of the time, we try to help as much as we can the problematic children in schools. As you will know, in the school that Amy actually came from, there could be some problematic students. You know, problematic students could be, if you're going to look at their background, could be products of broken families, could be products of, let's say, inflexible parents, strict households, or could be a product of environment, could be a product of self-pity, nature. So these are things that we have to look, no? So school psychologists will try to help people, especially children, with the behavior modification among children, okay? So what about students who are or psychologists who are working in the university, teaching and research? We do teaching and we conduct research. Most teaching psychologists work in colleges and universities. Now, if you're going to teach, you must also conduct your own research. As I mentioned to you earlier, a teaching psychologist must always contribute to the body of knowledge that we will be using. We'll not stop using the work of others. We need to establish our own concept. We need to come out with our own concept, with our own contribution, little contribution, so that others may actually use our work and eventually enrich psychology as a profession. So most teaching psychologists are working in colleges and universities like Crack Evans Issue. As I said, there are two psychologists here, me and Miss Carol. I take care of two departments and Miss Carol does the other department also. Now, most psychologists who teach also are engaged in research and writing. When we teach, we need to, or we ought to, do research, and we ought to write our own publication. As much as we can, we need to write our own books, no? And of course, in other universities, if we are very lucky, you know, if we have a research department, because research is too extensive, let's say, too extensive, very difficult to do. Sometimes some colleges are employing full-time research psychologists, no? From time to time, they will be given teaching loads, but as much as they could be, if they are engaged in full research work, they must come out with something. Other psychologists are doing that, like in the case of University of Pennsylvania, among others, where there is a separate psychological research institution, like in the university where Simon Freud came from, University of Vienna, among others. Okay? All right. Moving forward, most of the researches that are done by teaching and research psychologists would always be focused on very specific area already, very specific concept. We try to answer the specific philosophical issues that divide psychology until now. See, like in the case of developmental psychology, we're always looking into the explanation of the differences on the individual based on nature and nurture issue or debate. We have to look into the developmental stages of an individual. We try to explain the behavior of an individual based on a specific stage of human development. No? Developmental psychologists will study how behavior, personality, and performance change with age. Your behavior before is different from the behavior that you display right now. There is a transition, of course, but along that line, when you are going to stay on that particular state already, you must always follow that task, follow that developmental task, no? Or else there will be fixation. And the concept of Sigmund Freud is just like that. Sigmund Freud identified 5 stages of human development: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. No? So every single individual who belongs to the specific states must always follow specific characteristics. You see? So we are going to look into specific characteristics of an individual that is belonging to a specific group. This is the area of developmental psychologists. No? We like them because they follow on people. You see, when they study, they really focus. Particularly, if they are trying to study an individual, they would look into the behavior of an individual when he is 7, then when he is 14, when he is 21, stages. They follow that particular individual. Okay? That's how developmental psychologists study. No? So a developmental psychologist studies how behavior, personality, and performance that will actually be changing through time. So some sample questions that they may engage in when they try to study human individuals: that what do people do or know as adults that they do not know as children? You see, there are things that we do not know. Either way, when we are children, we try to be adult. When we are adult, we try to be children. What makes us thinking that way? Right? So what do people do or know as adults that they do not know as children? No? So is this due to biological changes or increased experience or both? So we are going to factor in the experiences that they may actually have. Of course, obviously, a 20-year-old child is different from the time when he was 10, much more when he was 5. There is a big difference. Now, if you're going to look at 20 years old, when you were 5 years old, you were different. When you were 10 years old, you were different. Your preference could actually be even changed. Your preference could be even changed. Before you like cartoon movies. Now you do not like anymore because you like something else. There will be changes. So these are some of the things that we are going to look into. The changes may be associated with biological changes or with the change of experience that we may actually have. We could have enriched the experiences that we may actually have as of now, or both. Okay? So moving forward, learning on motivation. This is on the area of cognitive psychology and on educational psychology. All right? By the way, is there any questions so far? Do you follow? You're tired?
Sir, now we follow.
All right? Now, let's try to focus on learning and motivation. Here, the psychologists try to look into the learning or motivation on an individual, no? They investigate how behavior relates to outcomes of past behavior and to current behavior. They're always trying to connect the past behavior to current behaviors. Now, this is a secret that we have also in psychology. In any category, in any discipline that we have in psychology, we are always looking into the past. Of course, this is initiated by Sigmund Freud. We must always look into the past. What triggers the current characteristics, the current behavior that we have, the past could have something to do with it. So this is some way trying to understand that the past could always affect the present behavior of an individual. Now here, the psychologists do the following, no? Sometimes they ask these questions. Do predictable rewards produce better learning than less consistent rewards? The reward system, like in the case of operant or on, are you familiar with operant conditioning? I mentioned to you this is actually the major work, operant and classical conditioning. Operant conditioning, the major work of Titchener, and on classical conditioning, this is actually the major work of one among the few Nobel Prize psychologist winners. Actually, we have Ivan Pavlov, who won Nobel Prize in medicine, but he is not a medical doctor. He is a psychologist. He studied on behavior of dogs. That's why he was able to formulate his theory of classical conditioning. Now, does the reward system will actually work, all right, on the outcome or educational outcome of an individual? We have to look at that way. No? All right. Moving forward, now we have also here in cognitive psychology. This is a branch of psychology that deals with how we digest knowledge, how we utilize knowledge, how we think. Now, a cognitive psychologist studies the process of thinking and acquiring knowledge. What is the best way to think and what is the best way to learn? They will always focus on this simple question. What do experts in the field know or do that sets them apart from other people? How do they think? How an individual think? No? So, like for instance, now if you're going to look at what you are doing before an examination, how do you study in order to retain maximum content of the lesson that you are trying to study or memorize? Or how do you memorize? No? Other people would do so many things. Other people would play background in the music. Other people would always, let's say, walk back and forth. Other people would sleep first so that at the middle of the night, they would actually wake up in order to study and memorize, because they would always claim that they could easily study at night or early hour in the morning. Usually it's just like that, no? But many cognitive psychologists are always telling that you can easily study. Your brain is very active when it's actually fresh, when it's free. So when it's actually going to be free, it's actually in the early hour of the morning. So that's the reason why you can actually work or do so many things at the early hour in the morning, because the brain does a lot of work at night. Especially, it actually processes a lot of information that you have on that particular day. So the best time to study, according to some of the cognitive psychologists, would be in the morning, because your brain is fresh and it has already processed the memory that you could actually have a day before. Okay? Anyway, we will focus on this. We will study more about this next meeting. So I do hope that you were able to follow me. In order to follow me, I suggest that you read chapter 1 of the book. No, I do hope that you downloaded already the book by James Calat, Introduction to Psychology by James Calat. All right?
Yeah, downloaded it.
So I hope that you read, no? Now, I think we have enough. I did not give you break. So we can actually go early today. Now, for your attendance, please write. I think we will be online again on Thursday, isn't it? Are we going to be online again on Thursday?
Yeah.
Yes.
For this week only, right? We are going to be online.
Yeah, only for this week.
Only for this week. Yeah. So, is there any questions so far? If there are no questions, then you write present plus you write in number 2 digits only. Then I think we're good to go. We can dismiss. We're always dismissing this way. No, there is no break in between, so I can actually dismiss you early. All right. All right. Thank you so much, and have a very good day. I hope you will read chapter 1. No, by the from the book of James Calat.
Doctor, please close the recording and send it for us with the PDF.
No, the recording is already. Did you find the website, the link that I actually sent you?
Yeah.
So there
It
is
has the recordings there.
the recording is also there, and the PDF is also there if you can actually find now. So that you can have this all the time. You can access everything then from the link that I actually give you. Okay. So Mark, did I answer you?
Yes.
All right. You can actually click the link that I provided you. Anyway, I'll send you an email again. All the recordings and all the PowerPoints will be there, including the textbooks. Okay.
What exactly?
I will go check them.
I sent an email to the group last week. Just
Which
click
group?
the BDS, year one.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you're going to look at your email, if you belong to that group yet, then you can actually receive or you receive, no?
Yeah, doctor, we received it. I
If
saw it.
you do not receive, most probably you still have some problems with the
Doctor, yes,
account.
you gave us the link. You sent
Yeah.
it by email.
By email. But I believe there are other students who are not yet a member of the class officially because of accounts problems. So I actually encourage you to give me your personal email so that I can actually include you in the email that
Okay,
I
but
send all the time.
I mean, where I can find the recording lecture, like this lecture, the recorded one, can I find it there?
It's also there, right? It's also there. It should be there.
It should be there?
Yes, yes, the video, the recording, it's
Okay,
there.
I'm gonna check. If it's not there, I'm gonna text you.
Yes,
Email.
please. It's there, it's there. I'm so sure it's there because I actually place it there. No?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, doctor.
All right. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
What about the attendance?
The attendance, it's there already. Since this is recorded, I am going to look at the transcript of our class today. The transcript of the messages that we have. Right in the message board, your 2 digits, the last 2 digits of the ID number.
Okay.
Those who do have different ID number that does not start with 20, please write your whole ID number. Let's say you start with 19. Those who have or repeating or actually coming back, write your whole ID numbers. But those who start whose ID numbers start with 20, you do not need to write the whole numbers. Write only the 2 last digits. Okay.
Yeah, doctor, I found the recording lectures there.
It's the right.
Yeah, it's down on the left side.
Down, it's down. Okay, very good. Now, likewise, I'm going to do the same way. I cannot send you individually the recording because it's big.
No, doctor, you can just send it to the whole PDS year one.
No, it's actually big. Big.
Oh.
You know why?
Okay.
It's big.
Just
It's
put it
big.
in the link.
It's big. So
Yeah,
I'm
just leave
just
it in the link there.
I'm just putting it in the link. All right. So that's why. Okay. All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
Doctor.